Dr. Balatramier has a long and distinguished diplomatic career. He was South Africa's ambassador to Angola during the Mandela administration, and if you'll pardon the expression, you are the principal cheerleader for South African investment in Angola, or promoter, I should say. If I could just start off by asking each of the panelists to give their 5 minutes of views on the main issues which cover this sector. If I can start with you, Elio.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here and address such a distinguished group of participants. Let me give you a little bit of history of the World Bank in Angola. Angola became a client of the World Bank in 1989. And then in 1992, we opened the office in Angola, in Luanda. And with the resurgence of the war in 1998, the office was closed and then reopened again in 2003. In these 20 years of relationship with Angola, the bank has invested the total amount of about $860 million, which is not a lot. Some of you may agree with that. But it has to do with the limited capacity of the funding sources that we use for Angola. Angola, for the time being, continues to draw on IDA resources. And IDA is the International Development Association, which is the concessional window of the World Bank Group. And it depends very much on capital allocations made by the donor countries. We're now going for round 16 of IDA allocations. But Angola should be phasing out of IDA because its per capita income has increased significantly over the last few years. And it should join the commercial window of the World Bank, which is IBRD. And that will allow the World Bank Group to start not only lending more to Angola, but also using different types of instruments, which so far have not been possible, such as guarantees, mostly. So that's essentially where we stand in terms of relationship with Angola. It's not an easy client, and it's not made easier by the fact that we are a small player. But nevertheless, we continue to engage, and I think the only reason we continue to engage is because there is a perception that we add value to the areas in which we work, essentially by bringing knowledge, allowing Angola to learn from experiences of other countries elsewhere, and also the name brand, I think, is important. I think Angola realizes that being a client of the World Bank brings them some level of comfort in terms of relationship with other lenders. And that is certainly the case now with the IMF as well. Perhaps I will stop here.
Fine.
And then, we will go to questions later on.
That's great.
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, Roger, if you'd like to give your opening views.
Edward, thanks very much indeed. I actually prepared to participate in more than one of these sessions. And so what I'm going to do with the approval of the chairman is touch on the governance dimensions. And remember, I don't talk from a politically cynical point of view. I talk from a business pragmatism point of view. So some of the things I'll say might be a bit uncomfortable for the political cynics. From a business point of view, there's something that a South African registered company, in other words, any company that is based in South Africa and is governed by the present Companies Act, and as from the 1st of April next year, a new Companies Act. I've interacted with a lot of legal opinion, and there's no question in my mind and in their minds that the South African Companies Act, with its 20 pages of governance, with its business judgment rule and all that sort of thing, governs a South African company's operations in Angola. In other words, the first thing you have to think about when you head out for Angola is your own Companies Act. And there are a lot of people who haven't even begun to read it. It's a good idea to have a look at the Companies Act now. The second thing is the Anti-Corruption Act that dates back a few years, which is specifically, explicitly, extraterritorial in its application. And basically it says things like influence peddling is a criminal act in South Africa. By the way, it's a criminal act in Angola as well. The word influence has been used earlier today. You have to be extremely careful about whether or not you're entering into a territory which could be a criminal, could have criminal implications. And then, of course, the other element that's important from a governance point of view for a South African company heading out, and remember, it's not just a South African company, it would be a company that has a registered company in South Africa. So, foreign company, registered and declared as a foreign company, but is still governed by the South African law. And I'm talking about the King II, the King III now, Code of Corporate Governance. If you are a listed company, at the end of every financial year, you need to say in your annual report, we conducted our business anywhere in the world, everywhere in the world, in accordance with King III. That includes Angola. If you are not a listed company, then you have a moral obligation to conduct your business in accordance with King III. So those are things we need to think about before we even look at the new Angolan Companies Act, the new Angolan Commercial Code, and all those sorts of things. So perhaps that's something that somebody might like to pick up on later, and we can deal with it. I've spoken about the influence peddling side of things, and as a matter of interest, ever since the session on what you might call the what did we call it here? The ethics rearmament of Angola. And those of you who watch Angola carefully will see that the Secretary General of the MPLA joined with a whole lot of representatives of Angolan civil society and churches and so on, not so long ago, to talk about the Angola's ethically challenged situation and how do we fix it. So, you know, that is something that I think is particularly important. And one of the consequences of that event seems to have been that the members of the Angolan elite that have been brought on board as partners with foreign direct investment are now shutting down. For example, I have a recent case where a foreign investor suddenly had a huge problem, so they picked up the phone and they called their influential person who said, put the phone down, I want nothing to do with this. Okay? They'd spent a lot of money on this guy. I think he was getting $10,000 a month for his privilege of being in that position. And this is what he said when the crisis came. So that's something one needs to bear in mind. And then on a slightly different issue, but still relating to partners, and this is relevant to, you know, what's going to happen tomorrow. You know, in South Africa we have categories of people that you might call struggle veterans. Well, not only do we have struggle veterans, but Angola has struggle veterans. People who really put their shoulder to the wheel to make things change, particularly before 1975 and so on. So what happened last year? The government of Angola decided that these guys need a better deal because a lot of them are old or a lot of them are out there not surviving too well. So how do we give them a better deal? As a struggle veteran in Angola, you can go along and you can now apply for, and I've seen the documents, you can apply to be approved as a struggle veteran. You get a document which says you can import anything into Angola free of import duty. This is what we all are waiting for to happen with the SADC trade agreement in Angola and South Africa and so on. In fact, if you have a partner who has the certificate, he can import these things in free of import duty. And if you now wish to sell them in Angola, these things that you've brought in, this is from anywhere in the world, your partner is exempt from consumption tax. So those of us who've got partners who are not struggle veterans are now suddenly in quite a weaker position, where we could be benefiting by 40%, because import tax is about average of 30% plus consumption tax, that's 40%. If I was a business person, I'd be looking for a couple of these guys. I do know if you would like an introduction. I don't charge for these. So then just a couple of points as far as policy is concerned. For me, really everything that the President is doing and everything that's cascading down is aiming at ensuring that the 2008 election promises are delivered. Now, most of us sitting in this room know that the million houses are not going to be delivered by 2012. But there are a whole lot of other things, like the water for everybody, clean water for everybody. In the trip that I mentioned earlier, we were in southern Angola. Everywhere we saw evidence of the clean water for everybody. Everybody had access to clean water wherever we went, and we traveled north, south, east, and west in the southern part. So that's looking good, but there are other things that maybe not looking so well. We've alluded to the problems of last year as far as the US dollar liquidity crisis and so on was concerned. For me, I see the President's policy at the moment is basically fixing the imprudent financial and economic mismanagement that contributed to this US dollar liquidity crisis. All you have to do is read the IMF documentation on Angola, and you can see that's what's driving the President right now. We see it every time that a new minister is, that wonderful word that we use in Angola when we send one of the guys packing.
Exoneration.
Yeah, you get exonerated. If the guy who phones you to come and see the President says, for purpose of exoneration, you're in trouble.
Yes.
Okay. One of the things that's been touched, last point,
if you could, just a last point,
was public-private partnerships. Can Angola effectively deliver various things? That, of course, has been done for a long time. SAB Miller and the Angolan government had a public-private partnership at the Angola brewery ever since the early 90s. It was very successful. And they used that tremendous success of that project now to now build their own brewery and take things further.